2022, and this is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. It's the Anthony Davis Show. For a couple of hours, we're going to chat, hang out, spend some time together, look through the news, and just work out what the hell is going on. What is going on? I don't know. As you know, Backchannel is the only place you can listen to and watch and chat with hosts of live shows right here on your device. So if you'd like to join in, you can obviously talk to me via your Echo Show device. If you've got one of those, it's like an Amazon speaker with a screen on it. Wake it up, say, then your message. You can do the same by going to backchannel.tv, by typing your message, and you can watch the show on YouTube if you don't have any of those things. Easy. Today we're going to look at the rules surrounding trans athletes. We'll also look at the White House left behind as states drop COVID rules. Homeland Security warns Ottawa-style anti-vax convoy could wreck the Super Bowl on Sunday. And finally, Black History Month, Betty Davis, no relation, the pioneering US singer and musician dubbed the godmother of funk, has died at 77. I don't know how this is possible, because my grandmother's name was Betty and my grandparents' shop was called Betty Davis. I didn't even know about Betty Davis, the jazz singer. I just didn't even know about her. I mean, how did that happen? Absolutely no idea. I knew about Betty Davis, the actress. How did this pass me by? So I'm going to spend the day, looking her up and apologizing to myself for not knowing. It's just unacceptable in my book. It's unacceptable to not know. I worked on 2 jazz radio stations, as a host. Never mentioned her. Never played a song of hers. Nothing. Stacey, good morning. Welcome to the show. We're going to jump onto the local newspapers. We're going to start with the news press for Cape Coral and North Fort Myers and Fort Myers. It's kind of Florida, Oh, by the way, Carla's here. She's in England. I'm in Los Angeles. This is how we do it. It's a very warm day. The weather in Los Angeles is crazy today. We had Santa Ana winds all night. My whole house was shaking violently. Stuff everywhere. Crazy. A bird's nest fell out of the tree in front of my house. Hanging from a tree. Lovely little bird's nest. But also we have a heat warning. So we have a severe wind weather warning in place, and we have a severe heat warning. Heat. And it's the 10th of February. Carla, it's February, and Los Angeles has a severe heat warning. It's just after 9 in the morning. It's already 73 degrees. It's going to be so hot in February. This is what we're talking about. We've been talking about climate change for about 10 years now. This is it. This is it. Welcome to the climate change. Okay, the news press. Officials want nursing home changes. Florida lawmakers pursue revamping staffing standards. This is, I guess, after the, it says, more flexibility to nursing homes in meeting challenging needs of residents. Gives the flexibility needed to provide person-centered care. Well, that would have been nice in the first place, don't you think? More manatees on the front of the newspaper. 3 ways to help manatees. It says Florida federal wildlife officials could lend a hand. There's 1,000 dead. I mean, it's crazy. What were they feeding them? Lettuce recently. I think they were feeding them lettuce. Crazy. My air conditioning is on, and it's working quite nicely, and it's still pretty warm in here, It's pretty warm. Seeing if there's anything I could turn off just to cool it down a bit. It's pretty warm. Nothing really gives off much heat in here. That's the crazy thing. Everything's kind of... I feel blessed that I'm not really in a space that's giving off a lot of heat, but I also recognize that there is no air in here. Wish me luck in this extreme heat warning. Fort Myers hires firm regarding complaints. Yes, will probe claims from 2 retired police officers. An outside firm to investigate claims of wrongdoing traded by 2 ranking, now retired members of the city police department. And other issues in the department, it's a bitter dispute between the former police Major William Newhouse, who headed the Fort Myers Police and Internal Affairs Division, and former Fort Myers Police Department Inspector General Donald Oswald. There you go. So they're obviously having it out. You know? This is me keeping warm in this insane heat. So there we go. That's the news press. Let's move on because I really want to get through the papers as quickly as possible because there's so much to talk about today. Where are we going to go next? Hang on, everybody, hang on. Stacey, Jacksonville, Florida. We're going to the Florida Times Union. Ladapo back in Senate hot seat. It says Surgeon General grilled at second confirmation hearing. This is Florida Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo. I mean, do you remember this the other week when they were quizzing him? The Democrats were quizzing him at the Senate meeting room. And they were like, does the vaccine help the coronavirus? And he refused to say yes. Do you remember? He's completely underqualified, this guy. He's been chosen because he's loyal to the politics of Governor Ron DeSantis. So yesterday he dodged questions about how much time he's been spending at the University of Florida, where he also works, his plan for promoting boosters, and his association with a fringe medical group. He also refused again to say whether he'd been vaccinated, calling it a private medical matter. Those were posed to him by Senator Tina Polsky, who had a first crack at questioning him and remained his chief interrogator of the Harvard-educated research doctor from the University of California, Los Angeles, before the Senate Ethics and Elections Committee. Polsky is the same senator he snubbed several months ago by declining to wear a mask in her office at her request. She'd recently begun cancer treatment. I mean, he's just a bad person by the sounds of it. If someone's just had cancer treatment and you're like, could you please wear a mask in my office? And you say no, you just don't let him in the office, so get out. Unlike Senate Democratic leader Lauren Book did at the first meeting, Polsky did not ask for an apology. Instead, she saved her dig at Ladapo for her closing remarks after a lengthy hour-long extra inning of grilling. Do you know, I need to watch this. I'm going to go on the YouTube or something. I'm going to watch it because I'm going to enjoy this so much. The Elections Committee voted 5-4 Tuesday night to recommend his confirmation. Yeah, of course they did. We're in the middle of a pandemic, Polsky said, sizing up a nominee who was not recommended by his former supervisor. Is part of a right-wing fringe medical group who has turned his position into a political one, who is dubious about vaccines and thinks masks are useless, even when requested by someone to wear one. Yes, he was appointed by Ron DeSantis in September to replace Dr. Scott Rivkees as the state's Surgeon General. I mean, this is what's going to happen. You know, because you can't find decent people. So the reason why Trump can't get a decent lawyer. Do you know what I mean? Because all of the good people are not crazy. If you want crazy people to join your insane, conspiracy-laden right-wing movement, then they're not going to be super qualified. And so what's going to happen to the people that live in these states where these unqualified people are working is they're going to get a less good service. And it's going to mean that people will die. That's what it's going to mean. But DeSantis doesn't care. They just want to own the libs. Council may up grant funding. Non-profit program gets a $7 million aspirational goal. The Jacksonville City Council approved a measure on Tuesday that may substantially increase funding for public service grants, which support non-profits that provide a range of human services. The newly approved ordinance includes a $7 million aspirational annual funding goal for the grant program. The 2020-2021 total was just $2.9 million. It requires applicants to provide more detailed information about their finances and past accomplishments. And then finally, a photograph of a 9-year-old Jacksonville entrepreneur behind Mini Queen's Donuts. This girl, Carly King, she juggles school, dance classes, homework, hanging out with friends and family during the week. On the weekend, she adds filling business orders to the mix because she has started Mini Queen's Donuts, a pop-up donut business in Northeast Florida, and they look delicious. Tiny little donuts. Wonderful. So there we go. That's how the newspaper kind of starts this morning. Let's move on to another newspaper. I do love newspapers, don't you? Do you remember newspapers? They're like a paper with news printed on them. Do you remember? Now we read them on the internet. Still read the papers, still laid out like a newspaper, but we just read them on the internet. Funny, isn't it? What a world, eh? What a world. Pritzker lifting mask mandate on the front of the Chicago Tribune. As Governor J.B. Pritzker on Wednesday announced plans to lift most state indoor masking requirements by the end of the month, medical experts and Illinois residents remained divided on the best timeline to end COVID-19 protocols and return to pre-pandemic normalcy. Hey, can I just say something? This is very, very important. If your governor or prime minister or anybody says you don't need to wear a mask anymore, it doesn't mean you shouldn't wear a mask anymore. Wear a mask anyway. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's guidance. It's guidance. Make a decision yourself based on risk. I'm going to keep wearing a mask. I just am. That's all I have to say. Some say these rollbacks are long overdue, as numerous states and other countries are also loosening their rules, citing quickly falling case counts and positivity rates. It's going to go back up again, isn't it? It's going to go back up again. And widely available COVID-19 vaccine and booster shots. Others express hesitancy, recalling the brutal business shutdowns and revived mask mandates last year, following a summer when many government officials, as well as much of the general public, falsely believed the pandemic was approaching its end. My belief as to whether it's approaching its end is like half-fold. Do you know what I mean? I have like a half-fold feeling about it. It's not full-fold. I have a half-fold feeling. I feel like... I don't think it's done. I'll be honest. I don't think it's done. I think the fatigue has set in, but I don't think it's done. Tragically. I mean, you know, what are we supposed to do? You know, what are we supposed to do here? James, hello. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show. Ken has joined us as well. James, is in Oregon. Ken is in Arizona. Both first-time watchers and viewers and listeners. I think James is listening and Ken's watching. So welcome, guys. Great to see you and hear you and know that you're part of the show. You can wake up your device and just say hey and hi and join me. You know, you can send me a message just by talking if you've got an Echo show or typing at backchannel.tv. Also moved to take effect on the 28th of February. School rules will stay in place. The indoor mask mandate is going to be lifted in the schools as well. So that's something to consider. And also a photograph of a Holocaust survivor from Barrington. The headline is, for Holocaust survivor from Barrington, this is revenge. Listen to this. It's interesting. It says, if Steinmetz's willingness to share his story of being a Holocaust survivor had been dependent on face-to-face connections, the Barrington resident's words might have been lost during the pandemic, which has limited in-person interactions. But Metz, who was taken alongside his mother, Magna Metz, to the Theresienstadt concentration camp in what is now the Czech Republic at just 8 years old, developed an element of tenacity that never left. And when Metz, who's 86 now, learned about online video platforms, he began using the technology to reach others with the story. He said there's an intense anti-Semitism in the world today, an increase in hate, Metz said, of recent events, including incidents in the Chicago area. As far as I'm concerned, it's even more important now to learn. I believe education is the major tool to help. Do you know, I saw these Canadian truckers. They're like right-wing Canadian truckers who are causing a blockade at the border at the moment because of, vaccine and mask mandates and everything. And they were being interviewed and they were like, it's like the Holocaust. And the interviewer was like, why? And he was like, well, he said it's like we're the Jews and the authorities are the Nazis. And I was like, wow, really? Really? Because you won't get vaccinated. Try living in an internment camp and not eating for a month. Just saying. It's not the same. People have a very short memory or maybe no education of history. So Metz of Barrington calculates that he's done presentations for around 94,000 people over the past 10 years, with more than 12,000 of those connections just over the past year due to his newfound ability to do presentations online. With virtual sessions eliminating geographic barriers, Metz has addressed audiences that would have been impossible to reach. This includes his former high school. in Denmark. Interesting. So, 1943, he and his parents were deported to the concentration camp. And now he lives to tell his story. Amazing, isn't it? Yeah, did you hear about Marjorie Taylor Greene's malapropism yesterday? Oh, it's doing the rounds. It has gone everywhere. She tried to say Gestapo, and guess what she said instead? You'll never guess. Carlos, don't look it up. Tell me what you think she said instead of Gestapo. Close. Try again. Gazpacho. So now all the memes are doing the rounds about a cold soup being what she's comparing the Democrats to, a cold soup. I mean, come on, you know? I mean, it's no better in Britain, of course. Liz Truss, who is famously the foreign secretary in Britain, who's trying to negotiate her way between Russia and Ukraine, knows nothing about Russia or Ukraine, it seems. And old Dmitry, who's been doing the negotiations, tricked her yesterday in talking about 3 places. And she's like, yes, yes, yes. And he's like, actually, none of those are in Ukraine. She was like, oh. And then last week, she confused the Black Sea with the Baltic Sea. It's just relentless, isn't it? It's just relentless that these people are underqualified, undereducated, and also they're just play acting. They're literally playing a role. Liz Truss is not a real foreign secretary. She's pretending to be the foreign secretary. And it's the same with Marjorie Taylor Greene. She doesn't have any real beef. She's just pretending to be, an activist or an opponent. She's really a very... She shouldn't be allowed anywhere near Congress. She's just not that person, you know? But this is all we've got. I mean, Liz Truss, who's in England, I mean, who is she? She brings nothing to the table. Nothing. Okay, let's see what else is happening. So that's the Chicago Tribune this morning. Let's go on to the commercial news from Danville, Illinois. Illinois. They lead with Pritzker and Etsky address plan to lift mask mandate. Same story. Overdoses increase as incidents rise. Police issue fentanyl warning. The average age was 44 years old. Most are white males dying from overdoses. And county records another COVID death. They've had 271 deaths now in Danville, Illinois. So that's how they lead this morning. Let's move on. Let's move on to the Illinois Journal-Star now. We're staying in Illinois. You know, we kind of bounce around the states, and so we're staying with Illinois. And they lead with coexist with COVID. Same story about Pritzker. It says, if hospitalizations for COVID-19 continue to decline for the rest of the month, J.B. Pritzker plans to lift his executive order that mandates face coverings indoors by the 28th of February. The plan does not apply to schools. It's unclear what level of rise in hospitalizations could lead the state to change its course, but Pritzker and health officials said at an afternoon news conference on Wednesday that such a scenario was not out of the question. Well, I mean, this is the thing. It's fluid, you know. We have to keep moving around with our thoughts, don't we? You know, that's our job. Our job is to be ebb and flow as the virus ebbs and flows, and be willing to change. Because my feeling is that all the people that are not into it anymore, they just want to see the trajectory of this diminish. And what I'm saying is that it doesn't look like that. It goes up and down, up and down, up and down. And it will continue to do that. And sometimes it'll be up and sometimes it'll be down. And we will, react accordingly. Or I will not react accordingly. I'm just going to stay masked and stay socially distanced. That's my choice, my privilege. Regardless of what happens with hospitalizations, masks will continue to be mandated in schools, on school buses and other public transportation, at nursing homes and congregate living facilities, and at daycares beyond March 1st. I mean, the great thing about this pandemic is that we have masks. Can you imagine if a mask didn't exist? We weren't smart enough to have thought of that yet. The mask is such a cheap simple thing. The surgical mask is the best one because they're a couple of cents each. And they really work. 3 layers, metal nose pincher, wear them tight. They work. I have boxes of them. I buy boxes of them. I've got little pink ones for my children. I've got larger blue ones for me. And I've got this giant box of N95s that don't fit. KN95s. N95s like gold dust. Can't get those. Protesters gathered outside of Peoria City Hall on Tuesday, and concerned residents addressed the city council to encourage council members to find a way to keep the Spirit of Peoria riverboat in Peoria. Employees of the paddle wheel boat, which has been in Peoria since 1988 and offers trips on the Illinois and Mississippi rivers, say it's been sold to an undisclosed buyer outside of Peoria. The sale means the riverboat could be moved from the city. Now, that would be a shame. I do love those old riverboats, don't you? There's something kind of magical about them. Oh, that's right. Stacey, have you ever been to the San Antonio River Walk? I think it's very pretty there. James is with us as well. Hi, James. Stacey's having hot dogs, chips, and a brownie, so she might not be able to answer about the River Walk. Once you tuck into that brownie, there's no coming back. James, good morning. Ken, good morning. It's lovely to hang out with you this morning. Really is. Okay, let's go to the Lake County News Sun next. We've done the Journal Star. Lake County News Sun. And they lead with dispute over Bradbury collection may be over. If we get it out to the public to see, that's a win for all of us. This is members of the Waukegan Historical Society Board of Directors and a deadlocked Waukegan Public Library Board of Trustees have mended their frayed relations over the future of the Ray Bradbury collection, agreeing to work together. That's nice. Photograph of Governor J.B. Pritzker. Is he like a celebrity or something? I mean, he's got an amazing name. He sounds like he wrote Catcher in the Rye or something. Do you know what I mean? He sounds like somebody from history. So he's got up and made this speech, and obviously it's reverberated around the states. But he said at the end of the month he will lift the requirement for face coverings to be worn in most indoor spaces to slow the spread of COVID, but the mandate will stay in place for K-12 schools. Election year's goodies are on the way. It says Christmas is coming early this year for Illinois taxpayers. Or is it the package of tax relief bills offered by Governor J.B. Pritzker? Some Valentine's Day affection. They say it's an election year and the third year of the COVID-19 health crisis, and the Democrat incumbent is advancing a $1 billion bundle of bonuses to ease an increasingly distressed electorate. Some Republicans think Pritzker is vulnerable on a number of issues, which is why 5 GOP gubernatorial candidates have lined up to challenge him in November. So he's basically giving everybody a bit of a rebate, which is, always useful, helpful. Anything else on the front of that paper? Task force formed to fight human trafficking in Lake County. Carla, I see you've got a cup of tea there with a tea bag with a tag. You know, the tea bag with the tag that you just dunked your tea bag in. So yesterday I had an incident. I was sitting on the couch. I like to make Earl Grey tea, and I put the tea bag with the tag hanging out. And I sometimes wrap the tag once around the handle of the mug. I have a giant mug. I like a huge mug. And I have it with oat milk, just a splash, not too much. And I'm sitting back. So the water was boiling. I'm sitting back. And as I lift my hand, I don't realize that the tag has got caught around my thumb. And it pulls the tea bag out of the hot tea, tears it, so all the tea pours out, and splashes all the tea all over me, and literally burned my stomach. My stomach was red through my t-shirt. Covered me in half a huge mug of boiling tea, just for a moment of just lifting a hand and it getting caught in the string. I mean, I was just like, yeah, what is happening to me? 1 minute, I'm sitting there relaxing, nice cup of tea, just finished the show, just going to take 10 minutes to myself. Next minute, I'm covered in boiling water. Listen to me. You got to have milk, right? You got to have milk. You just got to. And if you don't drink dairy, I have tried every type of milk in tea, right? I have 1 cup of full-strength Yorkshire tea in the morning, and then I have 2 or 3 cups of Earl Grey for the rest of the day. And I put a splash of oat milk in because I don't like it black. And let me tell you something. I've tried almond milk. I've tried soy. I've tried everything. Obviously, I used to drink it with dairy, but I don't eat dairy anymore. I don't ingest dairy. So, a little bit of oat milk. It's completely delicious. You know, you need to hang out in Los Angeles for a while. Oat milk is like, everybody orders oat milk. It's every coffee is with oat milk. Nobody has dairy here. You don't put too much in. I mean, if you put too much in, that's no good. But that's why I like to leave the bag in, because then it brews. You know? I'm not leaving the bag in anymore after yesterday's disaster. I actually tasted black Earl Grey for the first time the other night by accident, because I like to make a chamomile tea before bed. All my cute little activities are all coming out now. And I'd accidentally picked up the wrong tea bag and put in an Earl Grey, and it was sitting by my bed and it was dark and I couldn't tell. And the next thing you know, I'm kind of drinking this Earl Grey and I'm like, this tastes weird. And I was like, and then I had to get up and I don't know. I'm not sleeping very well at the moment. It's my kids. That's why. Lake County authorities on Wednesday announced a broad local initiative in their fight against the growing crime of human trafficking. At a media briefing, State Attorney Eric Reinhardt and representatives from police and social services agencies said that the county had received $1.5 million in federal funds from the U.S. Justice Department to create a local and federal task force aimed at taking on human trafficking. The State Attorney's General office will receive half the money, while a Safe Place, a domestic abuse treatment center in Zion that helps trafficking victims, will receive the other $750,000. They say traffickers who would exploit and abuse others for their own profit will be caught and brought to justice because of this new task force. The mission of the task force will be to reduce labor and sex trafficking in Lake County via aggressive investigation and prosecution. There we go. Stacey says yes to the San Antonio area. That's very good. Thank you. I'm pleased that you've done that lovely little walk. Nice. Okay, that's the Lake County News Sun. Let's move on. Move on to the Herald Bulletin for Indiana next. I really want to go to some of these places now, you know, like reading a little bit about the local politics. It's very good for me to kind of know a bit more about these places. And now there's Indiana I would like to visit. Where else was I thinking yesterday that I'd really like to go? It was somewhere similar. I forget now the name. But, you know, fundamentally, you could travel around the United States indefinitely and you would never run out of places to see. There's a lot to see here. Okay, Herald Bulletin this morning. Bingham Square Apartments have 3 potential buyers. Okay. County's public safety pay raises approved. Funding derived from local income tax hike. Filling rural internet gaps. Filling rural internet gaps. Startup costs are an obstacle for many rural broadband initiatives. Yeah, do you know, I'm still amazed as to how many people have, terrible internet. If you consider the fact that, life without internet is chaos. And can I give some advice about this? Because this is actually very important. And Carla is a prime example of somebody who needs to listen to this. You know, a lot of the time, the internet connection that's coming into your house is fine. The problem is the equipment you've got that's sending it around your house. And the first thing I do, if the internet company provides me with a free modem, is send it back. You don't need their modem. You just need or maybe you do need their modem, but not their router. That's right. You just don't need the Wi-Fi one. The Wi-Fi one needs to be your one. And fundamentally, you could just spend a little bit of money. Don't be like, oh, well, it should be free and it doesn't work, and then use boosters because they don't work either. Trust me, like if you've got a bad internet signal and then you buy cheap boosters and you try and boost a bad signal with cheap boosters, your internet's going to be even slower. So the secret is budget for like a couple of $100 and know that $200 is going to change your life because you'll have fast internet all over the house. And buy yourself a mesh system. Just a mesh system, that is all. It's 3 boxes. They go in 3 different faraway places of your apartment or your house. They all talk to each other. There has to be a tri-band. It needs to be tri-band, which means that it has 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, and a separate 5 gigahertz, which connects the 3 of them together. And that enables you to have fast internet no matter where you are in your home. It's totally worth the money. Totally. But, the internet companies, they basically send you a cheap, mass-produced modem that is just about good enough to, deliver Wi-Fi if you're sitting right next to it. But if you really want it to travel through walls and things, you need to get something a bit better. And there's a new standard now called Wi-Fi 6. So if you can afford it, get a Wi-Fi 6 mesh router system. Please. It's essential. It's essential. Anyway, let me read on. It says here, last year, as the pandemic continued to keep her away from her students, Beverly Doughty spent parts of 2 days in her car, parked in the middle of a clearing on her son's 25-acre property near the Madison and Grant County line. She's a general resource teacher at Madison Grant. She relied on a mobile hotspot provided by the school, oh my goodness, to post lesson plans, file grades, and do other tasks, because having moved to the country a few years prior, a steady broadband internet connection wasn't available. I struggled, she said, and if I'm struggling with meeting my students to help them with their work, then I know it must be really hard for them. We have a lot of kids here who don't have internet. Reliable internet access, broadband and otherwise, has been a problematic issue for residents, businesses, and lawmakers alike over the past decade. Despite attempts to work with internet service providers on several projects, state and local government officials only had sporadic success in connecting many rural areas. I mean, this is insane. This is insane. Think about this for a second. Think about it. It's 2022. The woman is having to drive into a field to pick up a mobile hotspot. It's just terrible. Imagine how isolating and cut off you would feel. Yeah, it's going on in the same country where they invented the internet, like where the SpaceX is sending up internet satellites all the time. I'm telling you, what's going to change everything is satellite internet. That is going to change everything. Once this all starts to happen and Elon Musk has got them all up there and everyone's going to connect, you're going to have internet up there, and you're not going to have to worry about cables or infrastructure. You just need the box in your house. It'll talk to the thing in the sky, and it'll be done. It'll be a done deal. It'll be finished, and everybody will get fast. And do you know something? Here's the crux of this. Everyone will have the same speed. Everyone's speed will be exactly the same. And we'll be communicating through... do you know what I can imagine now, Carla? I can imagine you and I watching me saying this now back on YouTube in 10 years' time. That's what I can imagine. Going, oh, doesn't he look young? And going and saying, wow, look how bad the quality is. Because in 10 years' time, we're all going to have the same high-speed internet via the satellite. I'm telling you, it's going to change everything. And people won't ask questions like, oh, is your internet speed okay? Or is it cutting out? Or can you move near the window? Move near the window. Jump out the window. I'll tell you why these rural areas can't get broadband. It's a quite simple reason, and I'm sure you can guess. It's because the internet companies can't make a profit in areas where there is a small population. So they have to pay for infrastructure to be fitted, right? Which is very expensive, but they're not making it back because there's not enough people living there to make a profit. That's the reason. It's as simple as that. because the government doesn't pay for internet to be fitted. It's all covered by private companies, and they make that money back through their subscriptions. But in these rural places where there's just a few people living, you're going to need like thousands of people in order to pay for the infrastructure. And they're just not. So the internet companies, because we live in a capitalist system where these companies are free to charge what they like and do what they like when they like, they're just like, nah, we're good, thank you. We don't really want to go into that area. That's why you can't get a Starbucks in the middle of nowhere. It's the same with Starbucks. They go places where there is going to be footfall because they need to recoup the money that they spend on brown water. You'll never get me going into a coffee shop and buying, like one of these chain places and buying brown water. You just wouldn't get me doing it. I just can't see the point. To me, it's a scam. It's like the biggest confidence trick in history. Carla, would you ever go into one of those shops and buy a coffee for like £4 or something? Yeah, you got to go to the independent places for sure. I just won't go into Starbucks. I just won't do it. I can't bring myself to do it. I think I went in one time recently, and it was because I was very ill. It was an emergency. I didn't buy anything. But yeah, the quality is just not there, is it? It's just not good enough. Then you go to these mass-produced places. But we're so indoctrinated into the brand and being part of the machine. It's crazy. Crazy town. State Senate panel considers bill barring transgender female athletes. So we're going to talk about this a bit later, but let me tell you the story. It comes out of Indianapolis. This is also on the front of the Herald Bulletin this morning. It says the Senate Education and Career Development Committee heard 4 hours of testimony on Wednesday on a bill that would bar transgender female athletes from playing with other girls on school sports teams. The committee will vote on whether to advance the bill at its next meeting. The author, Michelle Davis, said the bill protected the integrity of female sports. They said, I know from experience that female athletes deserve fair competition and an even playing field. Davis said the bill would prohibit biological males from participating in high school sports on girls' teams and creates a complaint process. Proud transgender Connie Thompson, a Martinsville resident, rebutted arguments that transgender athletes differ too much physically from their cisgender peers to compete athletically. She noted that cisgender women, those whose gender identity matches their sex assigned at birth, also vary greatly in height and weight. Well, that is a very good point, isn't it? She said there's no way to separate out trans girls without excluding a lot of cis girls too. There's no epidemic of trans girls dominating girls' sports. That's a made-up non-problem just to attack us. The Indiana High School Athletic Association already has procedures for transgender high school athletes. None of the testimony in support of the bill identified an instance of a transgender athlete outcompeting peers in Indiana. There it is again. A solution in search of a problem. Come on, let's be clear what's going on here. It's just prejudice, right? It's just an excuse to own the libs. We'll own the libs. There's some crazy stuff happening in the news at the moment. Have you seen all this like Donald Trump flushing documents down the toilet story? That's what's dominating the American headlines today. Apparently he even ate a confidential document. It's like, really? Really? Nicole has joined us. Hello, Nicole. Bella, Remind as well. Welcome to Backchannel. It's 11 minutes before 10 here on the West Coast, 11 minutes before 1 Eastern. Let's take a look at the News and Tribune. Have I done the News and Tribune? No, I haven't. Okay, let's do that. The News and Tribune for Indiana. This morning, they lead with schools in spotlight. Local teachers speak out against House Bill 1134. This is the one that would affect curriculum in schools across the state. A teacher at Jeffersonville High School, Pam McCoy, She's been collecting letters from teachers, parents, and others regarding their concerns about Indiana House Bill 1134. The legislation calls for additional oversight of educational materials and giving parents more control over what is taught in schools. McCoy said she has gathered about 30 letters so far regarding the curriculum bill, and her goal is to reach at least 50. She plans to go up to Indianapolis next Tuesday with several other teachers to share the letters and discuss the topic with legislators. She said this bill is bad for students, bad for parents, bad for education. This bill would basically hurt public education greatly if passed. I'm trying to see what the bill is. Oh, it's okay. It's the bill about race and politics. Limiting how educators can address topics such as race and politics. So it's just restrictions to the curriculum. That's what it is. Authored by State Representative Tony Cook. Yeah, I know your game, mate. I know your game. I saw a wonderful film yesterday. I must highly recommend it. If it's an English film, Carla, you would love it. I don't know that the American people would particularly like it because it's quite gritty. But it's called Wild Bill. And I think it came out in 2012. And it's directed by Dexter Fletcher, who directed Rocket Man, who's a British actor. And I have a few connections with Dexter Fletcher, very strangely. One, I was in a TV show years ago called Press Gang that he was in. That was a very famous kind of cult ITV show, Press Gang. And so I was in that briefly with him. He was in it. And he went on to become a director. And Wild Bill is his first film. And it's set on a council estate in England, in the east of London. And it is very gritty. If you really want to know what real life of how the poor live in East London, it's definitely worth watching. But it was a very, very moving film. So then at the end of the film, it says in memory of his father, Steve Fletcher. And here's the other coincidence, is that Steve Fletcher used to be a mentor of mine when I was a child. So he was a tutor. Dexter Fletcher's dad worked as a tutor in the BBC. And I was a child actor, and so this guy and he became my teacher and a complete mentor, life mentor, because I had an absent father, and so I always look up to kind of other daddy figures. And he was amazing, this guy, Steve, and I remember him so well. So this film is dedicated to him because he died in 2011, and so this film was dedicated to him because it's about fathers and their children. It's a very, very, very nice movie. And it's got a couple of wonderful performances, well, a whole bunch of wonderful performances in it, but some really good actors in it as well. So I do recommend it. It's called Wild Bill, directed by Dexter Fletcher. And it's if you like a kind of what's his name? A Guy Ritchie movie. It's like Guy Ritchie meets Shameless, if I was to describe it, Guy Ritchie movie meets an episode of Shameless. Did you used to watch Shameless, Carla? Did you ever enjoy that show? That was quite gritty as well. It's like a comedy. I was in that as well, funnily enough. Just one episode in a Christmas special, playing the voice of a parrot, an obscene parrot. I mean, some of the jobs I've done over the years, it's crazy. I had to swear my head off in a parrot's voice. Consumer loan bill raises concern for low-income borrower is the headline. This is a bill that was passed by the Senate on February 1st, comes highly criticized by a coalition composed of 97 groups across the state. This is Senate Bill 352. It aims to make changes to Indiana's Uniform Consumer Credit Code regarding supervised consumer loans. The changes have various stakeholders concerned about the effect on low-income individuals in the state. Well, this always happens, doesn't it? Then they deregulate lending, and then the poor people who have got no money to live end up getting more loans from loan sharks, and then they end up being in more debt, and then eventually they have their homes taken away. It's a disaster waiting to happen. Anybody that approves stuff like this, it's like, The code describes someone who commits loan sharking as a person who, in exchange for the loan of any property, knowingly or intentionally receives contracts to receive from another person any consideration at a rate greater than 2 times the rate specified. The offence is a level 6 felony in the state, and it applies to all loans except for payday loans, according to Andy Nielsen, Indiana Community Action Poverty Institute's senior policy analyst. We used to have a huge problem with this in London, with what they called payday loans. Do you remember, Carla? It was like a whole thing about 10 years ago. It became a whole thing because the cost of living went up, and suddenly there were all these random companies that showed up, and they were like payday loan companies, and people were just getting these huge interest rates to get money, and it was all a scam. Everything was a scam. And eventually the mayor of London had to step in and change the law. In fact, I seem to remember one of these companies sponsored the New Year's fireworks, and everybody was up in arms about it. It's so funny to me. Anyway. Clarice has joined us. Clarice, welcome from California. Your first time here on Backchannel. Nice to know you're part of the show. Welcome. I'm Anthony. Carla's in London. I'm kind of talking to her, although you can't hear her because she's one of those voices in my head, And she's in this little tube here. There's a little tube back here. Carla's in the tube. Let me out of the tube. So, I'm in California. We just chat about the news, and you can comment, and it's like a very informal, nice 2-hour conversation, mostly one way, about the state of the world. We look at some, I just digressed and talked about the movies. I mean, you'll get a whole range of things here. And then the same story, different newspaper. This one, Senate panel considers bill barring, Bill Barr, thought he was gone, bill barring transgender female athletes from school sports teams. Same story, different newspaper. This is the bill author, Michelle Davis, said the bill protected the integrity of female sports. Of course, the transgender sports people are saying, well, look at the girls and tell me that they're all the same, when they're obviously not. It's just prejudice, isn't it? It's just prejudice. Should we go to California now, seeing as Clarice is in California? It might be a good idea. Let's go to the Bakersfield... what's it called? The Bakersfield... the Jefferson Library. Let's have a look. Where was that? Oh, no, I haven't done that. Should we do that? Let's just go back a second to the News and Tribune for Floyd County. Excuse me, let's look at this story. It says, Jefferson Township Public Library unveils new LGBTQ plus section. Ha! Hilarious. Go for it. It says it took the Jefferson Township Public Library about a week to make its collection more representative of the population it serves. Now, when a patron walks in and hangs a left, they'll be greeted by the LGBTQ plus section. It's full of more than 40 titles, along with DVDs of shows and movies that represent the community. They're items the library already had, but are now in a centralized location, making them easier to find. Library Director David Seckman said the idea was born after a session on diversity and inclusion with Leadership Southern Indiana. After the meeting, he reached out to Southern Indiana Pride founder Evan Stoner about how the location can better serve the LGBTQ plus community. He said, have you ever thought about a section in the library? That would be something that would be really kind of serve 2 functions and goes back to our main objectives. It's a welcoming space, and it'll make it easier for folks to use the library. And just a few days later, it became a reality. I suppose the other thing about doing this is it means that if you are offended, if you are somebody who is offended by LGBTQ plus, you can avoid the section. You can go somewhere else in the library. This section comes a few weeks after Indiana lawmakers pushed Senate Bill 17 through the Senate Education Committee. I think that's the book banning. I think that's the book banning in schools. That section 17. Okay, let's move on. We're going to Bakersfield now. Bakersfield mishandled. It says BC mishandled football players' eligibility, but went unnoticed. 6 weeks after forfeiting 3 games due to a self-reported clerical error that made defensive tackle Travion Bell ineligible, BC submitted a final roster to the Southern California Football Association that correctly included Bell. I probably shouldn't read this. I don't have a clue what they're talking about. I really am very bad with anything sporty. You know? But good luck. Enjoy your sports. I might watch the Super Bowl on Sunday. The Super Bowl, with the emphasis on bowl. I mean, it's here in California, you know, it's at the SoFi Stadium. We'll talk about it later, because there might be a blockade underway, you know. It's going to look a bit crazy. Grayson has joined us. Hello, Grayson. Welcome to Backchannel. Thanks for coming back. Should we do the US news update? Because it's 10 o'clock, and, you know, it's a podcast that I do each day that's available on the Volley Network, and you can download it, and you can listen to it, and you can kind of get your... you can get everything you need to know. Everything you need to know. Everything. In this update. Here it is.
It's Thursday, February 10. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US news update. I'm Anthony Davis. The Congressional Committee investigating the January 6 attack on the US Capitol announced yesterday it had subpoenaed former White House trade advisor Peter Navarro, a key player in then-President Donald Trump's effort to overturn his election defeat. The House of Representatives Committee said it is seeking records and deposition testimony from Navarro, who, according to public reporting, interviews, and his own book, was involved in efforts to delay Congress's certification of the 2020 election. He hasn't been shy about his role in efforts to overturn the results and has even discussed the former president's support for those plans, said Representative Benny Thompson, the committee's Democratic chairman. Meanwhile, the US government is planning to roll out COVID-19 shots for children under the age of 5 as soon as February 21st, according to a document from the CDC. The FDA is considering authorizing the use of the Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine in the age group, even though it did not meet a key target in a clinical trial of 2 to 4-year-olds. The drug makers said they submitted data supporting authorization at the request of the FDA in order to address an urgent public health need in the age group. Outside advisors to the FDA are scheduled to meet on the 15th of February to discuss whether to recommend the regulator to authorize the vaccine. The rollout of the vaccine for children under the age of 5, the only age group not yet eligible for the shots, is set to begin less than a week after the meeting. Your daily US news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to Backchannel.
There it is, the US news update, available to you wherever you get your podcasts. It's the 10th of February, 2022. Welcome to Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis, here in Los Angeles, California. You've got me for another hour. And then your pal, Hal, will be here. And you'll get a chance to hang out with him and see what he's got on offer. We're looking through the morning papers. We're in Bakersfield right now. They lead with scientists hope new research on valley fever bears fruit. Yes, there's a fungal disease known as Coccocardiomycosis. It's contracted when an individual breathes in microscopic spores from the dirt. Most people infected with the disease do not develop symptoms, but others develop fatigue, a cough or shortness of breath, fever and body pains. And in rarer cases, the disease can be fatal. Because it's present only in certain parts of the southwestern United States, Mexico and South America, valley fever is not very well understood by doctors and scientists. Research into the disease has historically not been well funded, but the scientific community may be changing its tune, because last week the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases awarded $4.5 million in research funds to UC San Francisco, UCLA, and the University of Texas San Antonio for studies on diagnosing, treating, and preventing valley fever. I get valley fever every time I drive into Studio City. That's an LA joke, by the way. That's a total LA joke. It's because we refer to Studio City as the Valley. It's in the Valley. So I'm explaining to Carla because she's in England. She's like, what are you talking about? There was a big story out of England yesterday. I was very proud of it, out of Oxford. Did you hear about it? The nuclear fusion story? Oh, they actually have now discovered. Yesterday, there was a discovery. They discovered how to do proper nuclear fusion yesterday. They created a 5-second moment of nuclear fusion. They've done it. It's huge. This is huge. This could mean low carbon, free energy. They basically replicated what the sun does. You know, you heard of the sun? That big hot ball of fiery gas in the sky? The reason that thing can keep burning indefinitely is because of whatever it is they discovered yesterday. It's a massive, massive story. And it's, it's early days, it's early days. But actually, this could be the solution. Because it doesn't come with that same nuclear waste that the current, nuclear... What's the current nuclear thing called when it reactor? The current nuclear reactor. Well, this is nuclear fusion. It's different. They worked it out yesterday. It's a bit like when they kind of mapped the human genome, or, these kind of moments in history where they're like, boom, worked it out. Cloning a sheep, or, growing an ear on the back of a mouse. These are all moments in our modern history where we're like, wow, something happened. Or when James Dyson invented a bagless vacuum cleaner. We're like, wow. Oh yeah, Dolly the sheep was just quite something. She looked exactly like that other sheep. Unbelievable. They both had fur and a snout. Amazing. It means they can do it in humans. You know that. It's just like law that prevents them doing it in humans. But they can totally do it now. They can do it with a sheep. They can do it with a baby, in a test tube. Kind of be fun though to experiment, wouldn't it? What do you think? Like, if you were to clone a human, how similar would they be? As in, what I'm saying is, would it be it's quite funny, isn't it? Would it be the case that they are identical? Or as they grow, do their synapses join up in a different way, or do they join up in the same way? That's what I'm asking. Is the synapse random? Back to the newspaper, it says the Bakersfield Police Department arrested 3 Bakersfield residents on suspicion of human trafficking and recovered 2 underage victims, according to a BPD news release yesterday. 7 adult victims have also been identified. The arrests are part of an ongoing human trafficking investigation conducted by local law enforcement agencies, the news release added. We are committed to identifying and holding accountable those that engage in the victimization of our most vulnerable populations, says the Chief Greg Terry in the release. So there we go. That's how the Bakersfield newspaper looks. Fresno B for California. They lead with Yosemite Firefall viewing guide. Conditions need to be right. We talked about that yesterday, and it was a beautiful sight, wasn't it? Seeing that from El Capitan, that water that caught the sun, and you had to be standing in the right place, and it looked like lava, hot, molten magma falling from the top of the mountain. State bill would ban gun shows at state fairgrounds. Well, obviously, got to do that. Proposed law would ban the sale of firearms or ammunition on state property, effectively barring gun shows from being held at any of California's 73 state fairgrounds. California tribe opens marijuana dispensary in the Fresno area. It says last summer. It says a memorandum of understanding was arranged with Madera County. Mentioned among the items in the memo was recognition of changes in federal and state laws to allow for tribal jurisdiction regulating cannabis. Oh, that's interesting. So that's a California tribe opening a marijuana dispensary. I still, I say this a lot. Coming from a country where marijuana is considered highly illegal, you don't even talk about it, let alone smoke it. To moving to a state where it's completely legal and it's everywhere. You walk down the street and you just can smell it because everyone's smoking. And you just get used to it. You're like, oh, that's nice. When the smell comes your way, you're like, oh, that's nice, free marijuana, And I just think, isn't it interesting how different places can be so legally, have such kind of diverse legal views? Because there's no reason to not make marijuana legal because, trust me, it hasn't changed California unrecognizably. If anything, it's made it a bit more chill. The only thing I worry about, though, is that a lot of people smoke while they're driving. And you do have to, California drivers are insane, completely insane. You literally take your life in your hands. There's no rules. You just go anywhere you like. You can overtake on the inside, on the outside, on the upside, on the downside. It's irrelevant. You could be in the far left lane, and if you're about to miss your exit, you don't think, oh, hang on, I'll just take the next one. You're like, I'm crossing 5 lanes. And that's what they do. 5 lanes of traffic they'll cut across to get out on that exit. And it's like, wow, okay. Little weed, kind of relaxed. Totally doable. It's quite funny, isn't it? It is quite funny. Okay, so I think we're kind of there. I think we're pretty much there now with these newspapers. There might be one more. Oh yeah, the New York Times, a classic newspaper. Cheers and fears compete as states relax mask rules. White House has been meeting with outside health experts to plan a pandemic exit strategy and a transition to a new normal. But behind the scenes, the effort is crashing into a very public reality. A string of blue state governors have gotten ahead of President Biden by suddenly abandoning their mask mandates. 2 of the administration's top doctors, Fauci, of course, and Walensky, they expressed qualified optimism on Wednesday about the direction of the pandemic. If cases continue to fall and no new variants arise, the country could be heading towards what we would consider more normality, Fauci said in an interview. But he cautioned that the situation is still very unpredictable and said any transition out of the current crisis would be gradual. And Walensky said pointedly that while her agency is working on new guidance for the states, it's too soon for all Americans to take off their masks in indoor public places. And here's one. This is coverage of the Supreme Court nomination. A court candidate with no Ivy on her resume. Well, that's wonderful, isn't it? It's a reference to her not being from an Ivy League school. It says it was just before Christmas, and Jean H. Toll, then the Chief Justice at the South Carolina Supreme Court, was in a bind. She needed an emergency order drawn up, but the courthouse in Columbia, the state capital, was empty. She was relieved to reach someone who assured her chief, I got it. It was J. Michelle Childs, then a state circuit court judge, who made a name for herself as one of the most adept on the bench. Within an hour, she came back to me. She had completed the order with footnotes and everything. Judge Toll, now retired, recalled of the day more than a dozen years ago. Days later, she delivered her child. So she was uber pregnant, and it was right at Christmas time, but she had her work ethic on full steam, as she always did. Women are amazing, aren't they? I mean, think about that for a second. Just amazing. The summary sums up. Can you imagine, like, what a man would do? Like, it's Christmas. The man would be like, find someone else. I'm watching TV. The memory sums up the reputation of Judge Childs, now a federal district court judge in South Carolina, who rose through the ranks of state schools, local government, and the South Carolina legal system to the short list of potential Supreme Court nominees for President Joe Biden, who has pledged to nominate a black woman to replace Justice Stephen G. Breyer. So there we go. She's 55. She's served on the federal bench since 2010. She's seen in elite circles as a long shot compared with other black female candidates whose high-profile connections and Ivy League pedigrees fit the mold of a traditional Supreme Court appointee. Do you know something? I kind of want to put my money on this person. Do you know what I mean? I would kind of like Biden to be like, Ivy League, up yours. We're going with Michelle Childs, J. Michelle Childs. She looks pretty impressive as well. There's a beautiful photograph of her on the front of the New York Times wearing her robe, and she, you wouldn't want to get into a fight with this person. It looks like she would, throw the book at you. I think it's wonderful. I'm going with her. My money's on her. It's a bit like, when it was they were announcing Biden's running mate. And initially, I was all behind Kamala Harris. I was like, it's going to be Harris. I want it to be Harris It's going to be Harris. And then I kind of start sniffing around the other candidates. And I'm like, Val Demings. And then I got big into Val Demings. And I'm like, it's going to be Val Demings. I'd love it to be Val Demings. It's going to be Val Demings. And then they're like, it's Kamala Harris. And I'm like, I'm fine with Kamala Harris. She was my first choice. Then she was my second choice. Then she became my first choice again. Now she's like my fourth choice. Oh, this is interesting. Yeah, it says people who have known Judge Childs for decades personally and professionally struggle to assign her a political ideology. I mean, there's good things and bad things about that. Let's be honest, because the court currently is like a 5-3 or 6-3 conservative-leaning court. So really, you do want somebody who is very liberal, right? You don't want anybody to side with conservatives because it just will become even more unfair. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see. I'm not 100% convinced that Joe Biden knows what he's doing about anything at the moment. Defiance of Trump makes Cheney an outcast in her own state. I mean, this is such a shocking story, what's happened here. On the front of the New York Times. It says, the women arrived in red formal gowns. The men in suits and tuxedos. They posed in a photo booth with a cardboard cutout of former President Trump and bid on auction items, including a Glock pistol in a gift basket. Saturday was the biggest night of the year for Republicans in southwest Wyoming. A prom-themed fundraiser at a Holiday Inn that sounds very luxurious, that drew 150 of the most active conservatives in Carbon, Sweetwater, and Uintah counties. But Representative Liz Cheney, the Republican who has represented Wyoming since 2017, was nowhere to be found. She spent Saturday night 230 miles away with a group certain to give her a friendlier reception. Reporters and media executives at the annual gathering of the Wyoming Press Association. The wrath that the National Republicans have unleashed on Miss Cheney, the Republican National Committee voted to censure her the day before the Rock Springs Gala, is nothing compared to the fury she is encountering from Wyoming Republicans. The state party not only censured her, but adopted a resolution to effectively disown her. Yet her response has been to become strangely invisible in her home state. I mean, let's be clear about what's going on here. Liz Cheney is the only Republican, apart from Adam Kinzinger, who is sitting on the January 6th committee investigating the insurrection, right? The insurrection happened. It's on video. Trump incited it. It's on video. It happened. He was denying that the election was fair for a year leading up to it, right? This is all true. So you've got to investigate it. You can't just let it go. You've got to have a bipartisan investigation. Cheney was prepared to do it. Nobody else was. Kinzinger was prepared to do it. He's not running again. Nobody else was. And of course, the Republicans are in total denial about what they got up to. It's a bit like when Trump at the moment is like, keeps saying how unfair it is. He's like, yesterday he said there's one law for the Republicans and another law for Democrats. And it's like, no, you keep breaking the law, mate. Like, you keep breaking the law. The Democrats aren't breaking the law. No one's being unfair on you. You keep committing crimes. And now it's clear you took 20 boxes of paperwork away from the White House, including arguably some documents that were eyes only, and that's illegal too. You literally cannot help breaking the law. It's just in your nature. You are a natural-born criminal. And that's the reason why it feels unfair, is because you keep breaking the law. There's only one law. The difference is the Democrats don't break it. The press never say stuff like this to him, though. They just let him say things. So offensive. And then finally, should we end on a happy note? Because there's this story out of China. Lindsay Jacobellis. She had the finish line in sight again. Long, the most dominant athlete in the racing sport of snowboard cross. She'd been this way many times at the Olympics. She'd never gotten there first, though, not even back in 2006 when she had to lead herself yards. She had to lead to herself yards from the line and lost the gold in one of the best-known Olympics blunders in history. Well, on Wednesday, on her fifth Olympic try at the age of 36, she would not let gold slip away again. Jacob Ellis finally captured her storybook ending while delivering the United States its first gold medal at the Beijing Games. Hers is a tale of a gold medal, lost and then found 16 years later. Amazing. That's right. They really went for her last time when she lost, didn't they? They really went for her. Everybody on the TV hosts and pundits and the whole internet was against her. And here she's just turned it around and brought it back. Only took her 16 years, but it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, I'm not a fan of sport, but I do understand how it can unite a nation. I've always felt that. Yeah, her mistake, as in when she lost the gold 16 years ago because of a blunder. Imagine how many times that blunder's been replayed on television and online and repeated and repeated and repeated, and yet 16 years later, as an adult, she was 22 the first time around. As an adult, she comes back and wins it. I mean, it's incredible. Testament to her strength, getting up and doing it again. And it's a lesson to all of us, isn't it? About how we struggle and then we pick ourselves back up. It's a lesson. Let's have a quick look at some of your messages. Christian's joined us. David says, hi. Hello, David. Bors is with us. Lily and Bob and Stacy and Grayson, Clarice, Remind, Nicole, James and Bella, and Ken as well. Thank you for spending your morning with Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. This is the Anthony Davis Show. I do want to, and if you want to message us at any time, don't forget you can go to backchannel.tv and you can send a message there. Or if you've got an Echo Show device, you just wake it up, say the word say, and then your message. And maybe some of you have been watching the Winter Olympics. Maybe you've kind of been... How do you watch the Winter Olympics? Where do you find the Winter Olympics? Do you need a China state television? Maybe I need to go look for it and just watch it for 10 minutes and just remind myself as to why I'm not really into sport. I bought a sign on Amazon yesterday, a giant sign, and it says no dogs beyond this point, and it's about this big. And I haven't decided where I want to put it. I'm either going to put it in my apartment or I'm going to put it halfway down the street. Because people walk their dogs up my street and they just bring them to my front door just to go to the toilet and then walk them back again. So I bought this sign. I thought it was going to be this big. It's the biggest sign you ever saw. It came in the biggest box you ever saw. No dogs beyond this point. Do you ever wonder who puts that sign up? It's me. People like me. It's 10:23 Pacific, 1:23 Eastern. This is Backchannel. The White House is facing pressure to revise its position on mask wearing as pandemic restrictions are eased in a number of U.S. states. The governors of New York, Illinois, and Massachusetts have said they will end certain mask mandates in their states. Earlier this week, New Jersey, Connecticut, Delaware, and Oregon unveiled plans to lift mask rules. Impatient governors have been urging the White House to release guidance for dropping the use of face coverings, but the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reiterated yesterday that it was not yet time to lift U.S. mask requirements. And Jen Psaki said that the Americans should follow the CDC guidelines rather than less restrictive state or local rules. Governors, though, are not waiting around for the go-ahead from the medical experts. They're just going for it because, of course, especially in Florida, where they've chosen a surgeon general who is an idiot, they think it's okay that these people should override Fauci or override Walensky. They're crazy. Keep your mask on. Unless it's really causing you a problem, keep your mask on. And definitely when you're indoors. Definitely. It's a no-brainer. All of the governors dropping restrictions this week, with the exception of the one in Massachusetts, are Democrats. Mask rules have already been eased or were never adopted in most Republican-led states. Seriously, I mean, when I went to Ohio for a few days, no one had a mask on. It was as if there was no pandemic in Ohio, apart from the fact that the hospitals were full, the ICU units were full. You know, it's like they just don't care. And, you can live like that if you want to. I mean, it's your choice. Not for me, but it's your choice. I have managed to evade the coronavirus so far. Touch wood. It says on Wednesday, governors of New York and Illinois announced that they would end COVID-19 mandates requiring face coverings in most indoor public settings, but keep it for schools. Kathy Hochul, the New York governor, said her state would stop requiring people to wear a mask or prove they had received a COVID-19 vaccine when entering most indoor public places from Thursday. But New York City, the office of Democratic Mayor Eric Adams, said people would still be required to show proof of vaccination to enter most public indoor places. I'm rather proud of my proof of vaccination. I kind of like showing it. It shows I have 3 vaccines on it now. I'm like, there it is, pet detective. I only get asked if I'm going to a restaurant. If I go to a restaurant, and invariably I'm going to eat outdoors, but to go outdoors, you sometimes have to go through the restaurant. So I would show my vaccination card at the door, and then I would go into the restaurant. That's kind of how it works. You don't get asked in England? Oh. Well, I think it's good to ask, and I like to know that everyone in the restaurant is vaccinated. Mainly because I like to know that they're all Democrats. That's a joke. That's not true. But it's kind of funny, though, isn't it? You'll end up just like eating in Democratic restaurants, Republican restaurants. This pandemic is... the timing of this pandemic in terms of dividing the American people is the worst. American people were being divided anyway. When Trump came in 2017... and started treating everybody completely differently. If you weren't with him, you were a nobody, and he would berate you and criticize you and tear you apart. And then the pandemic showed up like 2 years later, and then all of a sudden, it divided people even more. And the tragedy of this is that when the pandemic is over, the division will remain. The division is not going to go away once the pandemic goes away. This is it now. This is what it's like now. It's very sad. We are literally beyond the point of no return. That's kind of where we're at now, isn't it? It is the point of no return regarding the divisiveness and the, It's the point of no return. Chris has joined us. Hello, Chris. Thank you for joining. Christian's here. David and Bors and Lily and Stacy and Grace and Clarice and Remind and Nicole and Bella and James. I mean, we're inundated. I'm just sitting back for a minute because I've been talking for an hour and a half and I just need like a minute to kind of... Sometimes I'm just like, I can't take it anymore. I'm like Bryan Cranston when he's in the show Network. I can't remember the name of the actor in the film Network. What was the name of the actor who played the character? He's like, I can't take it anymore. I can take it, but I just need a moment. Do you know what it is? The other thing is, it's a very iconic movie speech. But I just feel that sometimes, like, if you do a constant talking, and I used to find this years ago when I worked on the radio doing like talk shows, you would spew so much carbon dioxide because you're constantly talking that your brain was not getting enough oxygen. And so you get lightheaded. especially if you're in like an air-conditioned space, like a quarantine space like this. And what ends up happening is you become very, you get like hypoxia. You get a very small level of hypoxia. And I used to find, because when I talked on the radio, it was for 4 hours, and one show I used to do was 5 hours. And they expected me to drive myself home after this. And at 5 o'clock in the morning sometimes, I would have to, like, having suffered the effects of hypoxia overnight, not eaten, just had like a little sip of water or tea, being completely lightheaded, spewing all this CO2, not getting enough O2, and no, O2 is water, isn't it? Is O2 oxygen or water? No, water's H2O. It's O2. O2 is oxygen. Not getting enough O2. Sorry, I had a brain malfunction. Yeah, I literally made my own point. Yeah, I couldn't work out the difference between water and oxygen. O2 wasn't coming in. CO2 was going out. A little H2O was ingested occasionally. RSVP. And then I would get in the car and I would literally have the most hair-raising drive home because I couldn't see, the cars, the lights dazzling me. And it was so dangerous. And I remember saying to the radio station, look, you're just going to have to get me a taxi. I'm really not in a good place at 5 o'clock in the morning. I can't do this. And bless them, they did. They didn't just get taxis for me. They decided to get taxis for everybody. We had taxis, and then they had budget cutbacks. And then me and then another host got attacked at a train station. So they decided to put us back in taxis. I only lived like 10 minutes away. There are advantages to living close to work, I used to find this. They used to call me in. At one point, I lived about 6 minutes away from the radio station, and they literally would sometimes call me with like 10 minutes notice. They're like, how soon can you get here? I'm like, yeah, I'm on my way. I really enjoyed that. I've always enjoyed being late to the party and having a really good time or putting on a good show or whatever it is. Talking of good show, I watched a trailer for a new movie earlier, which I think you might really like. And I can't even believe that I'm saying this out loud. But I watched a trailer for the new Jurassic Park movie. And it's brilliant. Because they've brought back all the original cast. So Sam Neill's in it. And what's her name? The actress with the blonde hair. Who was in the original with Sam Neill? Laura. What's her name? Laura Dern. And of course, Jeff Goldblum is back in it as well. And the actors from the new Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, are in it with them. So it's like the old meets the new. And it's called like Jurassic Resurrection or something. I don't know what it's called. Anyway, I watched the trailer for it this morning. It looks brilliant. It looks brilliant. I gave up. I went to see the first Jurassic World film in the cinema, and it was so terrible. I was like, I cannot get in with this new franchise. But this new one, with the old... I mean, can you imagine how wonderful it is to be an actor like Laura Dern or Goldblum or, to be in something that was iconic years ago, and then to get a phone call without you even having to sell yourself. You don't even have to do a self-tape. You don't even have to audition. Just get a phone call from Universal Pictures going, hey, listen, we would really like you to come back and be in the new Jurassic movie, and we're going to pay you millions of dollars. Because that's basically what happens, right? If you want Sam Neill or Laura Dern or Jeff Goldblum, you have to pay them millions of dollars. And they didn't have to do anything for that. They literally just had to take the phone call. I mean, obviously they worked hard on the film, I have no doubt, but the point is that none of them would say it's like work. If any actor says it's like work, then they need a new job. What's the film? Do we know what the film's called? Jurassic, I don't know. I tweeted it earlier. I'll have a little look in my own feed and see kind of what it says. It's called... It's called something like Jurassic Here We Go Again. Jurassic World Dominion is what it's called. Yeah. And it does look really good, but mainly because of Jeff Goldblum's one-liners. Goldblum is a big star here in Los Angeles. I mean, in terms of like as an independent person, not just as a movie star, because he does a jazz night. Do you know about this, Carla? He plays jazz piano, Jeff Goldblum. And so he does a night at a venue here in LA once a month. And he's got a band, a big band, and he plays jazz swing and sings and plays the piano and croons. And you go for dinner and you watch Jeff Goldblum and his band. And it's the most amazing night. It's like an LA thing to do. He's just, Goldblum is, for me, he's just eminently watchable. He's just such a nice person, you know? And have you noticed that when he's in movies, apart from The Fly, of course, because The Fly was one of his earlier movies where he had some transformation, but in recent years, he is expected to be Jeff Goldblum in the film. You know, he has a character name, of course, but they expect him just to do all of his Jeff Goldblum isms. And he's just so good at playing Jeff Goldblum, isn't he? You know, you really don't want him to do any deep acting. You just want him to be in the film. Just be like, can we see a bit of Jeff Goldblum now, please? I wonder if there's anybody who doesn't like Jeff Goldblum. Do you think anybody has ever been born in this planet who just doesn't like Jeff Goldblum? Chris, Christian, David? Do you like Jeff Goldblum? I mean, the question should be, do you dislike Jeff Goldblum? There's got to be someone. I bet there's just one person that dislikes Jeff Goldblum. Anyway, I've never seen his live show. My friends have, several times. I've tried to get tickets. You try and get tickets, they sell out in a flash, you know? It's like $30 to go see Jeff Goldblum. Of course you're going to do that. Should we look at the story of the transgender female athletes? Because this is Governor Kristi Noem, who signed the Senate Bill 46 on Thursday, codifying a debate about fairness in sports and transgender participation that has played out in the South Dakota legislature since 2015. The bill has been an important priority for a lot of the people behind me, she said, moments before signing it. I appreciate all of their hard work in making sure that girls will always have the opportunity to play in girls' sports in South Dakota and have an opportunity for a level playing field for fairness that gives them a chance to experience success and go on to potentially play at a higher level, earn scholarships, perhaps play professionally, and have a career. I mean, look, it's just obvious to me, right? It's just obvious to me that there's not going to be enough transgender people for this to be a huge problem. But for some reason, they're making it a huge problem. I wish I could explain it better than that, but to me it's not that complicated. You know? She said, I appreciate all of the hard work that girls will always have the opportunity to play in girls' sports in South Dakota and have an opportunity for a level playing field for fairness that gives them a chance to experience success, to go on potentially play at a higher level, earn scholarships, perhaps play professionally, and have a career. But unfortunately, you know, the anti-trans movement is huge when it comes to sport. I mean, generally, but when it comes to sport. And so these anti-trans bills purport to address fairness in sports, but sports have never been fair, says Jessica Luther in Vox. She says part of the fairness issue of The Highlight, our home for ambitious stories that explain our world. In March, they report, nearly 36 people gathered around Republican Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves as he signed the state's newest legislation. When he announced Senate Bill 2536, the Mississippi Fairness Act is now law, the crowd, which included Republican State Senator Angela Burks Hill, the bill's sponsor, applauded and cheered. The bill bars trans students attending public schools in the state from participating in sports according to their gender identity. and mandates that they do so according only to their agenda assigned at birth. This, the vast majority of Mississippi lawmakers believe, is fairness, and they're not alone. Serena Sonoma, communications coordinator for GLAAD, describes 2021 as a record year for anti-trans legislation and for transgender discrimination. She said as of April 22, 144 anti-trans bills have been filed in state legislatures across the United States. Of those, 69 target trans athletes, and many of those, like Mississippi's new law, would force children in particular to participate in sports according to the gender they were assigned at birth. And some go further. A Minnesota bill would allow any trans girl or woman who tried out for or participated in sports or women's sports to be charged with a misdemeanor. Oh, that's lovely, isn't it? What a lovely thing to do. Another in Florida, titled the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, initially contained provisions that would force some children to undergo a routine sports physical examination to inspect their genitals, genetic makeup, and testosterone levels. Lawmakers have since removed the genital inspections. The bill passed in both chambers and awaits the governor's signature. I mean, I don't wish to be bipartisan, I don't wish to be partisan. But what is it with these Republicans? I mean, they are inhumane. Like, the thinking is inhumane. One Florida lawmaker, a Republican, Tracy Costa, defended the bill on behalf of her 6-year-old daughter, saying, "I cannot help but to stand in support of this bill to ensure her an equal playing field." And after a wave of so-called bathroom bills a few years ago and failed in state legislatures and the courts, anti-trans advocates have turned fairness into a talking point and made trans athletes their target. They were also responding in part to Joe Biden's executive order, stating that all students, including transgender students, should be able to learn without worrying about whether they will be denied access to the restroom, the locker room, or school sports. So there it is. I mean, I just find the whole thing to be utterly pointless and offensive. You know, if somebody is having to live as a female because that's the way their brain is wired, and they were born into a male body, do not persecute them. Support them. Entertain their rights. Give them the opportunities that they crave. They are women. They are. You know? The female brain is a force to be reckoned with. You know? You're getting into hot water if you start wanting to inspect genitals and think that that's an acceptable way of, you know, dealing with this. It's like it's not like 1926. Katrina Kargasis, a cultural anthropologist, bioethicist, and co-author of Testosterone, an Unauthorized Biography, says this argument is part of a resurgence of biologically determinist ideas, or at least the biology being the most important aspect to consider across a range of things when it comes to determining what is fair in sports. There is little, if any, evidence that trans girl women and women athletes are a problem in need of a solution. When it contacted 24 lawmakers sponsoring school sporting ban legislation to name examples of transgender athletes competing on girls' teams, they found only a few times it's been an issue among the hundreds of thousands of American teenagers who play high school sports. This is what I said at the very beginning. This is not going to be an issue that is big enough to warrant this huge, because all this huge thing is doing is creating a prejudice so that in future trans people are less likely to come out and they will live a life dressing up as a man. It was my favorite line from my favorite TV show of all time. Is called Transparent. It's on Amazon. It's my favorite TV show of all time. And the main character is the dad, who is trans, but, you know, his kids don't know, and eventually he decides to come out at the age of like 65. And one of his daughters, who's like in her 40s, says, "Are you telling me all this time you've been dressing up as a woman?" And he says, "No. All this time I've been dressing up as a man." And that's the fundamental point here, isn't it? That for people who are trans, they've had to dress up in the wrong gender identity just to suit society and match their genitalia. And when you know, like I know that I am male, like you may know that you are male or you are female, you will know, you know. Imagine knowing that as we know it, and to look at your body and see that it's not the body that should be connected to you. Imagine what that must feel like. Because, this is what we're dealing with here. It's as normal to them to know who they are than it is to you and I to know who we are. And yet to have strangers, let's have a chat now, shall we? Let's have a chat with Hal, who's on next. But just before that, I'll just to kind of mention Betty Davis, who we're going to talk about just in the last minute or so, because it's Black History Month, and she is the Funk Legacy, a rare interview with the 70s legend, is in a Toronto magazine, which I'm definitely going to read later. But in the mid-70s, she recorded 3 albums, self-titled They Say I'm Different and Nasty Gal, and of uncompromising funk featuring her hair-raising growl and songwriting that reveled in her sexual identity alongside the watertight funk grooves of her band Funk House. So I'm very interested in her, partly because she's a Davis, and I've always thought that anybody with the same surname as me is related. I've always thought that. And so I will be reading more about Betty Davis, and hopefully you will too, as we've been celebrating people that we might not know. She was dubbed the godmother of funk, and she blazed a trail with her raw brand of funk and sexual lyrics that would go on to influence stars including Prince and Madonna. News of her death was confirmed on her website by her friend Constance Portis, and tributes have been paid to her by stars including US rocker Lenny Kravitz and the estate of Prince, which wrote about her influence on film. He said, the late star once referenced Davis's work in an interview, saying, "This is what we aim for." Wow, that is high praise, isn't it? Okay, let's chat to your pal and my pal. Let's talk to our pal, Hal, who's on next. Oh, he's not here yet. Oh, well, that's nice. I'm sure he's like knocking on the door. He's always knocking on the door. In which society was that? Oh, in the Celtic society, yes. This is interesting. This is this is where transgender people in some societies, we're talking, Carla and I talk about Celtics, to be transgender was always revered going back, hundreds of years, because it meant that you had access to both genders, and that made you a more advanced human than somebody who only had access to one gender. Isn't it interesting how our minds have kind of colored these things now to feel or mean that they are somehow wrong? And, tragically, religion plays a big part in this, doesn't it? Because of the way that the Bible is interpreted. And a lot of the Christian evangelical movement is now really directing a lot of this policy with their views, and quite extreme views compared to the modern world that we live in, where we seek a relative equality. Anyway, turns out Betty Davis's original name was Betty Mabry, not a Davis at all. Hello, Hal.
Anthony, great to see you.
Great to see you, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. Oh, please.
Well, I was going to ask you if you'd heard of Betty Davis, the funk singer. I hadn't, and I should do.
You know what? Maybe I'm remiss in my music acumen, but Travis, my producer, shouted her out yesterday. R.I.P. Betty Davis. Yeah,
Right.
A funky lady, a pioneer in the world of music, and apparently we lost a great. But I wasn't as familiar, definitely not as familiar with her as the other Betty Davis. Spelled
Indeed,
Bette.
That's right. Yeah, I've lived in the
uh,
shadow of this name for years because my grandmother's name
Yes.
is Betty Davis, and so like
Oh, wow.
and my family had a business called Betty Davis, so the family business was called Betty Davis, and so for me it's just so insanely familiar.
I think it was might have been Johnny Carson or someone asked Betty Davis how to get. They asked her on a talk show, "How do you have any advice for someone who's trying to get into Hollywood?"
I think I know this one. Yeah.
And she replied, "Take Fountain."
Take Fountain, that's right.
Yes.
And my friend Abigail, who's a very good actress, has named her business Take Fountain Productions because of that great line. Yeah, Take Fountain. For those that don't know, Fountain is like one of the quickest streets to drive east-west or west-east across Hollywood. And so she's giving the advice, don't get stuck. A little less traffic.
Slightly a road less traveled. Anthony, I did have a question for you.
Yeah.
So I know you shun much of the pop culture and the noise and just the nonsense that's out there, and there is plenty of nonsense. But I did want to know, were you planning to watch the spectacle that is the Super Bowl?
Well, this is how it works for me. Because
Yes.
I've been here 5 years now, so I've started to get into the rhythm of the Super Bowl. You know, I know not to go near Ralph's that morning. You know, I've learned these things. But I will probably watch the opening ceremony or whatever you call it. You know, the pre-show. I think it's called the pre-show here, isn't it? Where they have
pre-game show. Mm-hmm.
Right. That's probably the bit that I'm going to watch and enjoy, and I'll get the atmosphere and I'll get all of the noise, and then the moment the game starts, then I'll turn it off and watch a documentary about persecution.
There was an Oscar-nominated documentary. I don't know if you've seen it. Was it about the health system in either the UK, the Ukraine, in either Ukraine or Chechnya?
Right.
I'll have to circle back with you. I watched a great documentary last year. Now it escapes me. But I am excited about the halftime show.
Oh, so explain to me what happens in the halftime show. Is that bigger than the pre-show?
Yes, the halftime
okay, well, then
show.
That's the one I need to watch. I'll have to set my alarm.
So every year they try to find the biggest musical act possible to fill the halftime show. The best halftime show ever, and I encourage you to seek this out on YouTube perhaps, Prince. Prince did a halftime show that will blow your mind. And I'm particularly excited about this year's halftime show, West Coast hip-hop luminaries. Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Kendrick Lamar, and then Dr. Dre protege, Eminem. So it's going to be a real who's who of hip hop, and I am excited for what they're going to bring, because there's a lot of hits, a lot of platinum records amongst those guys.
I saw Prince twice in concert, the same concert. I went like twice to the same concert. And it was in a venue in London which is kind of in the Round. He performed in the Round. And there was no access, because there was no understage access. So they smuggled him in a box. And this became like a thing. It was like, did you see that? Like, they bring this weird box on, and it was smuggling Prince into the Round in a box. And I'm sure it's online if you choose to look it up. But
I mean,
a
diminutive gentleman. A diminutive gentleman. He could fit inside a box.
It was like a shoebox.
One of my great regrets, Anthony, I'm really jealous of you now, because Prince did 25 dates in a row at the LA Forum here. And I went to none of them, and I'm face palming now. You don't know what you got till it's gone. I wish I had seized that opportunity.
Yeah. There are some acts. I saw Michael Jackson, like in terms of like the biggest acts.
Yes.
I have seen some of like the biggest ones. I love music. I just don't really like. I don't like to know anything about their private lives. I mean, obviously with Michael Jackson, you can't help it. But in terms of like people's art and their artistry, I'm all in for that. But in terms of like what they get up to with their wives and girlfriends and husbands, it doesn't interest me. It's none of my business.
You know what? Too bad more people don't have that same point of view, because, it gets messy out there.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
In a couple of minutes. Always fun to chat. That's your pal Hal. He's next here on Backchannel. I'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Have yourself a really great Thursday. Bye for now.